All right. Good morning, AP Music Theory. Today we're going to be talking about sight singing again. Yay! But I'd like to talk to you today about some strategies that we want to think about now as we're preparing for the AP exam. But before we do that, let's do our warm up. And I had left you with an assignment, part writing from figured bass. And so here's the exercise that hopefully you had a chance to copy off or print off and be able to do. And of course, as we look at this particular exercise or progression, shall we say, is in the key of G minor. And remember this, you always have two choices for the key. How do you figure that out? Well, for instance, in sight singing that we're talking about today, we would look at the first note and the last note, and we can do that in this particular piece too, although they've already told us what the key is. It's the key of G minor. But if you look at the bass line in particular, there's a G at the beginning and it ends on a G over there on the half note. So you always have to look and be sure you know what key you're in, okay? And of course, there's two flats in the key of G minor, which is also the key signature for B flat major. So those relative keys, okay? So the first thing that I always do is write the leading tone in a minor key. So that's why down with the G right there, you know, I wrote that little F sharp so that so that I remind myself that the seventh scale degree has been raised to leading tone. And then of course, the first chord is given G, B flat, D, and it is a one chord in root position, okay? Next chord is, and let's talk about how we figure this out. No pun intended, figure this out. But figuring it out is a good way to think about it because the figured bass really with certain implied things tells you everything you need to know. The six. So if we count above the E flat, it's E flat, F, G, A, B flat, C, okay? So six above is C. And then what you have to remember is that there is an understood three below that six. And that means that there's also a G in this chord. But if you have a six like that, the other way you can think about it is, hey, I recognize that as a first inversion. And so you know that that's the third of the chord. So you just step down E flat, D, C, and there's the root of the chord, okay? So this is a C, E flat, G chord. It's a 4 minor in first inversion because you go G, A, B flat, C, and Roman numerals are the same number as the scale degree that the chord is built on. C is the 4th scale degree. Okay, next one, the sharp is addressing the third above that bass note, which is the note F in the key signature, but that sharp says we're going to raise that 1/2 step. So this becomes a D, F sharp, A chord, and it is a 5 major, it's a major chord. 5 is typically a major chord because of that 7th scale degree raised to leading tone. So both in major and minor keys, usually the 5 is a major chord. Remember that, okay? Then it goes to a 5-4-2. It added the C because if you count up 4, C, D, E flat, F, and it's sharp 4, and so you raise it to F sharp, and then 2 above would be C, D, and there's where the root of the chord comes. Remember that interval of the second that you see? That means that the top of that second is D, of course, and that's the root of the 7th chord. So this is a third inversion, 7th chord. Don't forget about those inversions. That's the other way you can figure it out. If you know this is a third inversion, a 4-2, then all you have to do is realize that the note in the bass is the chordal 7th. It's the 7th of the 7th chord. And you just count back 7, 5, 3, 1. So if you count it all the way back, you would land on D down there. And this, of course, is a D, F sharp, A, C chord. And one thing I put the next chord there too, because I want you to always notate some way. I do it with these arrows, that the chordal seventh must resolve down by step in the next chord or hold until it can resolve down by step. So in this case, it resolves to B flat, which is the third of the one chord. And so the one chord is in first inversion in order for that chordal seventh to resolve down. Okay. Next would be, you can guess what that one's going to be, a 5/7. All right. And so that is a D. The sharp addresses the F, raised 1/2 step to F sharp. Then there's an A and a C. And so that's the 5/7 chord. The chordal seventh should resolve down by step in the next chord. Can't do that, can it? Because what have we got? A 4/3 suspension. 4 addresses the fourth above that bass note, G, G, A, B flat, C, okay? And so that's the non-chord tone, which has suspended from where it was a chord tone in the 5/7. And so I drew a line connecting that. So the chordal seventh can't resolve because the suspension takes over. And so the suspension then resolves to the third above that bass note, G, A, B flat. And that, of course, is the third of the one chord, G, B flat, and D. Okay? Hopefully, you'll be able to figure that out very quickly and just whip right through that on the AP exam in a few weeks. All right, next, I want to write a melody. Here's the melody I wrote, okay? And you're going to notice that for a lot of this, in fact, I think every move from one melody to the melody note to the next goes either in contrary motion with the bass voice or oblique with the bass voice. So, you know, like I moved up to C. Could I have gone down to G, for example? I could have, because that would have been thirds with the bass in parallel motion. G up to B flat, and then E flat up to G. But I decided to go in contrary motion to the bass, so I moved up to C. And then I moved in contrary again. I moved up to D and doubled the bass note in that particular case. And then look at those next melody notes. I stayed on D, the common tone, and then across the bar line, I stayed on D a third time across the bar line. And then do you see that in that 5/7, there is a D? And actually, since it's a root position chord, I could have left out the fifth, the A, and still doubled one of the other notes. And I could have doubled D, but that would have been D 4 times in a row. And so I typically wouldn't do that. But 3 in a row, you know, if you think about this, do, me, fa, so, and then it steps down, contrary motion, fa, and then it suspends, fa, me, do, okay? So that melody has really solved probably a lot of problems for the inside voices to go in pretty smoothly, and that will be good. I wrote the contrary and oblique motion. Do you notice that? There are 3 contrary moves between bass and soprano, and 3 oblique moves. And then, of course, the next thing I did was put in the alto and tenor. And, you know, on the second chord, I kept the common tone G and doubled the C, okay? On the second beat to the third beat, I stepped down to F sharp, the leading tone in the alto part, and then I had to jump down a third to get that fifth in there, the A. And then from the third beat to the fourth beat, the F sharp remains common and the A remains common, because really what happened, that 5 chord became a 5/7 in third inversion. And so we just had an additional note, the C, and so everything else remained the same. Now, some people will see that and they'll say, oh, that's parallel motion. No, it's not, because the fact of the matter is we could have written that third beat as a half note in every voice but the bass, but instead we wrote quarter notes on beats 3 and 4. Then moving across the bar, we stepped up in the alto to G, and we stepped down to G. So we doubled the root of this chord. We had already used B flat in the bass and D in the soprano. And so now we've doubled the G with the alto and tenor. Then the 5/7, we stepped down to F sharp in the alto and back up to A. So we just swapped again. And finally, in the soprano, we've got the suspension going. And so we've already taken care of that in the soprano, but we are going to see if we can get a G in the bass, and I doubled the G in the tenor. And then of course the D, I stepped down from F sharp. It doesn't have to go to G because it's in the inside voice. So it can step down to the 5th scale degree. And that works out really, really nicely. Here's what this one sounds like. It really sounds nice. Okay. Now, there's one more thing I want to talk to you about in this particular one. And we're going to talk a lot more about this on Thursday, because I'm going to be talking about part writing again on Thursday. And I really hope you'll tune in for that. But here's the thing that I want you to look at. Parallels, okay? Which ones are acceptable and which aren't. So, for example, from the second to the third beat, the C is going in contrary, the soprano is going in contrary motion to the alto, tenor, and bass. But the alto and tenor bass is all moving the same direction. The tenor is moving by a third, but the alto and bass, they're moving by a second. So we have to look at that, because parallel seconds, moving down in parallel motion by a second, we have to be careful that we don't have a parallel that's unacceptable. So now you have to analyze vertically and analyze what the interval is between the bass and the alto. So that's an E flat in the bass and a G in the alto. That's a third. Perfect. So that the next one's going to be a third too. That's a D in the bass up to an F sharp. We're always thinking in simple intervals, not compound, because this is really a compound interval if we think about it in its truest sense, from E flat up to G, because it's E flat up to E flat plus two more, space line. Okay, going on between the 4th beat and across the bar to the downbeat of the second measure. Now we are looking, the alto moves up and it's oblique with the soprano. So now the bass and the tenor are moving down. So we don't have any problem with them with the soprano or the alto. We already knew about the soprano and the bass. But what we do have to look at is between the bass and the tenor now, because they're moving down a step, each of them in the same direction. So down. And so we have to analyze vertically again, the C up to the A, C, D, E, F, G, A, okay? That's a 6th. And then B flat, C, D, E flat, F, G, that's a 6th. So 6ths in parallel motion are fine. They're very acceptable in 18th century part writing, okay? Then we look at the first beat to the second beat in the soprano and alto, because they're moving contrary to the bass and the tenor. The bass and the tenor aren't parallel. They're just similar motion, but the soprano and the alto are moving down. And if you look real quick, those are 5ths. The first one is G up to D. That's a perfect 5th. The second one is F sharp up to C. Well, F up to C would be a perfect fifth. So F sharp up to C is a diminished fifth. All right. So perfect fifth to diminished fifth, that's great. Do you understand? You have to look to see where those parallels are to be sure they're acceptable. Because if that had been F up to C, it would have been perfect fifth to perfect fifth, and that would be unacceptable. Okay. And we'll have more questions about this for Thursday as we go along. And I want to see if I can help you where you can see those fairly quickly, because you're going to have to see them quickly. Some people do them as they go along. Some people fill them all in and wait until, I think probably doing them as you go along might be better than what I just did, but nevertheless, you have to find those. All right, so let's get on. Let's talk about sight singing. Woo, I didn't have any fireworks today, but probably on our last day, if Mrs. Foote is okay with it, we're going to have fireworks again. And then I don't know, maybe she'll be doing that trapeze thing again. Wow. If you didn't see that, you should look at yesterday's lesson. Amazing. Okay. I was scared, when I saw what she was doing, but she was great. All right. Here is what we want to talk about today. Strategies for sight singing. This is going to be question 2 on our exam. And so we want to talk about some strategies that will help us where we can really make a 5 on this test, okay? And of course, you have lots of help this year since this is an open book test, but I want to talk to you about some things that maybe you don't have as much help as you might think about with regard to the sight singing. So first of all, there will be two melodies, just like normal. One will be in major, the other will be in minor. I'll never forget, I had a student one year and came running by my office after the test. Dr. Reeder, guess what? I said, what? The sight singing, both of them were in major. I said, oh my gosh, don't tell me that, please. They weren't both in major. Look at the key signature, okay? One will be in simple meter, the other will be in compound meter, one in treble clef, one in bass clef. That's the way it is every year. Number 2, you must look at the key signature and check the beginning and ending notes to determine whether the melody is in a major or a minor key. So many times, I scored sight singing last year at the scoring in Kansas City, and invariably people would sing the minor one in major. Obviously, they hadn't looked at the key signature. You've got to be sure you know which key you're in. You're going to be in one of them in major and one of them in minor. So bear that in mind. Look at the key signature, look at beginning and ending notes so you can figure that out real quickly. You ought to be able to just see it. Okay, number 3, don't hesitate or stop once you begin in order to keep from losing what is called the flow point. The flow point means that you have to start and go from beginning to end without stopping or restarting. Number 4, try to practice each melody with a pretty fast tempo, but then in your performance, take a fairly slow tempo in order to give yourself time from one note to the next. Too slow also can be a problem, but usually it's too fast that is more of the problem in the performance. But the faster you can practice, like when I practice, I try and sing the melody, over and over and over as many times as I can after I've practiced the parts where I might have a problem where it's a larger interval or something like that. And then I try and sing it straight through a lot. Number 5, you can write on the underneath the melodies or above the melodies, whatever you want to do underneath, like I've been showing you. Write solfege syllables or scale degree numbers. You could even sing note names if you want to do that. But write on the music as you practice. And I like to try and write while I'm singing so that I don't waste any practice time. So I try and sing the whole time that I'm going to be practicing. And of course, that keeps my voice warmed up and everything also. Sing out loud during your practice, exactly what I just said, so that your voice will remain warmed up and so that you've been practicing how you're going to sing that specific melody in your performance. Number 7, pick an appropriate pitch range for your voice by singing the lower note to the highest note of the melody. If the key of the melody is not right for your voice, if you feel like it's a little too high, like you're going to have trouble getting to the highest note that's printed in the melody, then you can transpose it to a different key. But most of the time, that printed melody will work for everyone. So really be careful about changing the key. Mrs. Foote was talking to you about this also, and she was showing you ways that you can figure out what's best for your voice, because her voice is a little lower. Actually, mine is too. But I just think that most of the time you can take the key that the melody is written in, and you'll probably be okay. But in case you're not, most of the time it's a matter of having to lower it. Sometimes it's the opposite. Okay. Number 8, sing using the system you know best. Hopefully you have a solfege system, or you use scale degrees. But in the end, if you begin to stumble, just get it done any way you can. Sing la, 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 da, 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 any neutral syllable you have to, in order to keep from stopping. Because the minute you stop, the minute you restart, you've lost 1 point, the flow point, okay? You can breathe anywhere since phrasing is not graded, but be careful not to make the breath so long that the duration of a note is shortened to the extent that it becomes a different duration. Like you've got a quarter note, and then you take this breath and you make that all the way to an 8th note or even less. That's difficult. So, the melodies, and we'll see that again in a minute, there are usually 2 phrase markings, and you're supposed to breathe between those phrase markings. And wow, last summer when I was scoring, I heard so many people who would wait right till after the phrase marking and then they'd breathe. It doesn't matter though, because we're not grading breathing. So if you need a breath, hopefully not after every note, but if you can't make it through 2 measures, then take a breath in there somewhere. All right. And number 10, hold all notes out for their full value. And here's something real important. I heard this so often when I was scoring. Don't forget about the duration of the last note. Last summer, I heard so many students who would get to that last thing, and it was almost kind of like, oh, I made it, and then they would stop that last note without holding it out like it's supposed to be. The last note, for instance, if we're in simple meter and it's in 4/4 time, probably the last note is going to be a half note. If we're in compound duple meter and it's 6/8, the last note's going to be a dotted quarter note. So you have to hold those notes out in order, because that last note is worth a point. And I'll explain to you in a second, because I want to just give you some highlights of how the sight singing is scored, okay? And there's more that goes into it than this. And really, the other things that I am not talking about this morning are probably giving the student the benefit all of the time. Every chance we can get, we're on your side. We want you to do well. But here is the major thing about the sight singing. First of all, most of the time, the simple meter melody is 4/4 and the compound meter melody is 6/8. No guarantees on that, but in looking back through sight singing melodies through the years that have been used as a part of the AP exams, it's shown that this is usually the case. All right. For purposes of scoring, the melodies are divided into segments, and each segment is 1/2 measure, a half measure. One thing, if it's not in 4/4, by the way, the simple meter melody could be in 3/4, and then this half measure segment becomes a full measure, because there would be 8 measures in 3/4, 4 measures in 4/4, and then a segment in 3/4 would be equal to a full measure, okay? 1 point is awarded for each segment which is correct in pitch rhythm, and tempo. So there are 8 half measures in 4 measures. And so there's 1 point for each half measure for a total of 8 points if you got them all correct in pitch, rhythm, and tempo. The 9th point is that flow point I was talking about. No hesitations, no restarts. The minute you hesitate too long or restart, then that 9th point is gone. You don't receive that point. Okay. So basically that's how it's scored. And there's some other things that enter into this. For instance, if you change the key in the middle, there's a way that you can get back on. You have to enter by the correct interval. And when you do that, then regardless of what key you change to, you can be in that key now. But you lose a point in there when you do change the key, getting back to where you're supposed to be or to the new key. Okay, so that's just a little bit. We'll probably give you more on this, but this is basically what you need to know. Okay, so let's talk about some things you can do. First of all, as far as I have my little 25 key thing this morning, like so, which I'll help and show you. Like if you have a keyboard, then you certainly can use that. You can play the pitches for yourself. But what you can't do and what you must know, excuse me, is how the rhythm works. So hopefully, needed to get a swallow of water there. Hopefully you've been practicing rhythm all along. So what I've done, I've spent a lot of time in looking at melodies, not just AP melodies, but other melodies as well. And what I find is that patterns, rhythm patterns in music, they do a lot of things the same a lot of the time in music of the common practice. So like this, where I've put 4/4 up there next to the first 2 rows and then 3/4 next to the bottom 2 rows. The top 2 rows are the most common ones. And I think that I went through most of the past melodies that were used on AP exams. And in the simple meter one, these are the only rhythm patterns that were used, basically. I think this may be all of them. So you have to know how this goes. So if we're in 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, ta, 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 well, ta, 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 and I normally end on that half note. But so you're responsible for looking at the rhythm of the melodies and knowing how that melody works. If you want to use a number system, you can go 1, 2, 1 and 1, 2 and 1 and 2, 1 and 2 and 1, 1, a 2 and 1 and a 2 and, okay, like that. And then in 3/4, 1 and 2 and 3, 1 and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2 and 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2 and 3. And so there again, basically, there haven't been, oh boy, I bet there haven't been more than 2 or 3 in 3/4, but you need to be prepared for that as well, okay? Then is my compound meter rhythm square. And everybody thinks compound is harder than simple. I don't think that at all. I think it's just a different flow. I mean, rather than the beat note being divided into 2 parts, the beat note here is divided into 3 parts. So this is like 1 and 1, and the numbers break down quicker on this. So you might just want to ta these, ta, 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 and I always end on number 5. Now, I didn't put these in exactly the order that they were used, but I'll tell you that number 1, number 2, number 7, and number 5 are probably the most used rhythm patterns in compound meter, 6/8 time. Okay, this is like 6/8 time. So 1, 2, 7, and 5. If you know how those go, then you've got it made. But I would really practice. I put them in these squares like this. Oftentimes what I'll do is project this on the screen, and then I'll point at different squares and we'll just go around. Sometimes I get students to come up to the board and do that with me, just to point at them. And we have a lot of fun doing that. But I think that the biggest thing is you need to know how each of those patterns sound and look. Okay, so next, you're going to need to warm up for the sight singing. So I gave you some of this is my favorite warm up drill that I use. And you can start it, like on C, do, mi, sol, mi, do, fa, mi, la, sol, ti, do, re, do, sol, do. Okay. And then go, up to do, mi, sol, mi, do, fa, mi, la, sol, ti, do, re, do, sol, do. Did you hear my voice give a little kind of tiny crack there? That's why you have to warm up, because it's morning for me and I haven't really warmed my voice up. So you've got to deal with that. Now, if you look down at number 2, now it's in bass clef, because remember, one of the melodies is going to be in bass clef. And so you've got to think about that. Number 3, wow, now I switched gears and I really made it a lot harder, because I put it in minor, key of C minor, right? Do, me, sol, me, do, fa, me, le, sol, ti, do, re, do, me, sol, me, do. Did you hear me hold that last note out? Okay, you've got to do that. And then bass clef. And then I gave you some more. This is, if you're a choir person, you might have had this in choir. Do, mi, re, fa, mi, sol, fa, la, sol, ti, la, do, ti, re, do, la, ti, sol, la, fa, sol, mi, fa, re, mi, do, re, ti, do. So you might want to use some of these warm-ups. Do you remember these from one of my lessons? The ending melodic patterns. Re, ti, do, fa, ti, do, mi, re, do, sol, fi, sol, do. I do the patterns, so I don't do them in the keys. But if you want to do them in the keys, play the half notes. Like I'm going to play, this is number 1, C is tonic, re, ti, do. And then I'm going to go down here to the bass clef. Fa, ti, do, do, re, mi, fa, ti, do. And then number 3. Mi, re, do. So I mean, you can do them in the keys, because certainly that's important. And then I gave you beginning melodic patterns. You remember these? Hopefully you've taken these. And by the way, I think my handouts are getting out there finally. So you can have these for these next weeks to before the couple of weeks to practice with. Okay, then here's what I did for you today, and this I will get this so that you can retrieve this. But what I've done is I've gone back and I actually wrote an article about sight singing for the College Board one year, and so I looked at all of the melodies that had been done in sight singing on the AP exams since it began back in, I think, 1997, 96, somewhere in there. So a long time ago, it's been on as a part of the AP exam. And that's why it's important that we have it on the exam this year, because it shows a real understanding and ability of music literacy. Okay, it's shows skills of music literacy is what I was going to say. it takes a lot of things into consideration. So the first thing that I did with these melodies is, and remember, if you've been tuning in to my lessons, I believe in using several different systems. And one of those systems is Do minor. So if something is all in minor, I use Do minor so that Do and So are still Do and So, just like they would be in a major key rather than La and Mi. But the La minor is perfect. It's a great system, but especially for relative keys. And then of course, scale degrees. Now, for instance, on this first one, if you look at that first one there, where it says, it starts on this pitch and it goes, Do, me, so, me, fa, sol, le, so, le, so, fa, me, re, ti, do. Okay, so I mean, if I were going to practice, I could do it just like that. Now, sometimes you might want to just play the pitches Do, me, so, me, fa, sol, le, fa, sol, le, so, le, so, fa, me, re, ti, do. If you're just trying to find what the pitches are, but then, you know, 1 and 2, 1E and 2, 1 and 2E and 1 and 2. Use your system, whatever it takes to do that. But so I've given you a lot of those older melodies from AP exams. I've given you, I think, 26 of them. Okay. And on this one, all of them have the solfege. So if you're using solfege in major, then it's Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, like number 13 at the top of this page, that's in the key of F major, right? But then if you go to 14, that's a minor one. It's in the key of B minor, right? 2 sharps is D major or B minor, and you can see that it starts on B, ends on B. And so then you might want to use La minor on that. Or you can always use your scale degrees if that's what you use. I like on this particular one, number 14, scale degrees, you have to know where the half steps and whole steps are, because this one, you know, if you start this like it's going to go sorry. Okay. And then it goes, this is 5, 6, 7, 1, 7, 6. See, then you have to go back to natural minor. 5, 4 higher, 5, 1. Okay, so for me to sing that Do, me, sol, le, fa, me, re, sol, fa, me, sol, la, ti, do, te, le, sol, fi, sol, do. So the solfege takes care of all of the chromatic tones for me. And that just makes it easier. That's the way I've learned and how I practice, okay? And then if you keep going here, we're up to number 26. There are 26 melodies that you would have to practice. And I'll be sure these get where you can, these handouts where you can get to them, okay? I'll be sure that we get them out there so that you can print them off or whatever you want to do. Then the thing is, I've given them to you again. See that number 1? That's the one that we had. Do, me, so, me, fa, sol, le, so. Sorry, A flat. And so now you can actually practice them and, you know, write the solfege or scale degrees. You can even sing C, E flat, G, E flat, F, G, A flat, G. For sight singing, I'd rather not sing the note names because you've got to add flats and sharps and that sort of thing. But I mean, sometimes I do sing note names. but I think the solfege system in particular would be helpful a lot if you've practiced that all year, or scale degrees. Either of those things would be a lot better than da 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 da, unless you've got perfect pitch. But then don't forget, you have to be responsible for knowing the rhythm patterns and how they fit together. Okay. And so, on these, like I gave you all of them again. And so let's go over, let me go over to the doc cam for just a second and show you what I'm talking about. And let me see if I can get there in a big hurry. Share and make that bigger. Okay. So, like here is, this is going to be D minor, right? Okay. So D minor. And so this is do, re. So I give myself a pitch, like this, and I'm going to go do, re, me, do, re, me, so, fa, me, re, do, ti, do, so, fa, so, le, so, fa, me, re, do, do, re, me, so, fa, me, re, do, ti, do, so, fa, so, le, fa, me, re, do. Okay, E natural. So then then after I do that, and I don't know how you're going to judge your practice time, how many times you think you need to do it, but then I'm going to sing do, re, me, so, fa, me, re, do, ti, do, so, fa, so, le, fa, me, re, do, re, me, fa, so, fa, me, re, do, ti, do, me, so, do, re, me, fa, so, do, so, fa, so, le, fa, me, re, do, and practice like that. Okay. So I think this could give you a lot of, ways to practice sight singing. And I think you ought to make a 5 on this test. I really think you ought to make a 5 on the AP test. That's what I'm hoping for you guys. And I think you can do it, but you've got to practice from now until then. And we'll talk about practicing part writing on Thursday with me. And, then next week we'll work out the time. They're publishing exactly how you're going to do the test and everything. I'll give you a few more. I think my time is almost up here. So I gave you some that are more recent. I didn't give them to you with the words because you're going to practice writing and all of that on these. The 2015 melodies, 2016 melodies, and 2017 melodies. I think we've used the 18 and 19 melodies already, some. So maybe we haven't used all of these yet. But anyway, it doesn't matter if you've already done them once, do them again. You can practice them and it will really make a difference for you so that you have a method going in that you're ready to do this. And of course, you want to practice in a short amount of time. I would say do 2 of these melodies in 10 minutes, performance and everything, and then try and, you have to figure out how you're going to record yourself. Like if you're going to use a phone or whatever you're going to do to record your audio for your sight singing. Some people use Audacity, things like that. And we'll talk a lot more about that as we go through the rest of this week and then during our prep week next week. And put this on your schedule next week at 9 o'clock. Uh-oh, there's my timer going off. At 9 o'clock, you should tune in because that will give you great practice for the AP exam coming up on May 19th. And of course, I'm in Central Time, so it's at 11 a.m., but it's at different times throughout the world. All right. Listen, I enjoyed being with you like I always do. Be sure to complete your practice with those melodies. And I look forward to seeing you again on Thursday. Mrs. Foote will be with you tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye now.